We're getting bits of information that Apple is getting a little bit more closer to combining every single operating system. Is that good or bad? Let's hope for the best. Just, we got this tiny bit of information saying that Apple is planning on the beginning of next year to start allowing developers to make apps that will both support iOS and run on, of course, both versions of iPhone and iPad, and also merge with watchOS, tvOS, and macOS. This definitely can mean a lot of different things since this is definitely theoretical at this point. We don't know exactly what it means. But as of right now, if developers want to make an app for an iPhone, but also want it to be supported on the Mac, they have to make two separated apps. Now, this report is saying that Apple's hoping to change that, similar to something Microsoft's done in the past, where a developer will be able to create one app that will work on both the iPhone, iPad, as well as your MacBooks and iMacs out there, which definitely arises some both frightening and exciting questions. Like, first of all, could this be the first step in the direction of having one universal operating system? This is something Microsoft has really tried to do and really kind of failed to do. I know that some of you like Windows 10, but I don't think it's arguable that Windows 10 is a platform that works across all devices. Really only great for laptops and desktops. When it comes to smartphones, that idea just kind of died straight out the front door. But of course, if Apple's doing it, maybe they're doing it right, and maybe they're taking the smart approach of trying to phase this in slowly. You know, this is not something you want to just issue all outright. All of a sudden now, there's no more iOS, there's no more macOS, there's no more watchOS. There is simply Apple OS, and that does everything. I think Apple knows that they have to kind of ease their audience into this, and I think getting developers to start programming in this way is a great place to start. Developers are what create all of the third-party apps that we love across all of these different devices, and if it's true that behind the scenes Apple is working on a universal operating system that would unite all of the different pieces of hardware that they support, asking developers to start merging them would be a great place to start. But then again, you kind of have to look at it as, where does the Mac App Store kind of stand right now? There, of course, is, the third-party ways to download apps on a Mac. You can just go to a website, and if it says available for Mac, you can just hit download and install. But then, of course, more recently, Apple's introduced this thing called the Mac App Store, which means that they're verified apps by Apple, which means they're optimized for the Mac. They're going to run really, really well. They're very smooth. They're very optimized. They can update through the Mac App Store, and overall results in a better experience. Microsoft did a similar thing with the Windows Store, and now they're doing a really scary thing with Windows 10s, which simply means that the only programs you can run on that version of Windows are the apps that have been verified by Microsoft, which definitely limits your library of apps very, very thinly. Apple's yet to do that in any form of macOS, but that's kind of what iOS has been since the beginning. The only way to download apps onto your phone, at least for the most part, is through the iOS App Store. So what I think we'll start seeing, not like immediately, we won't just have at Worldwide Developers Conference next year, I don't think they're just going to announce, there's one giant operating system now, and that is all. I think it's going to slowly make its way into each individual product, and something, as you guys know, I pride Apple on very heavily is the fact that they make all of their devices work together seamlessly. Now, that does not mean that they all have to have an operating system that doesn't necessarily work with them. I feel like Windows 10 was primarily designed for desktops, and on mobile was kind of an afterthought, and that's partly why it failed. What we may start seeing is apps on the iPhone's iOS App Store that, right now they say offers Apple Watch app or offers messages support or offers TV app. Now it might start saying offers Mac app, which perhaps could start mean if you start downloading an app that is available on the iOS App Store, then it'll start downloading on your Mac, treating it like it is a TV app or a watchOS app. Slow integration like that, I think, could be good. But one also has to ask the question, is there actually benefits to unifying all of your different operating systems? I could see it for developers, yeah, if you knew that once you developed your app once, it was now supported across all of the different filing systems on all of the different Apple devices there are, and you just have to provide minor tweaks so it supports different things like the watch and the TV. I could see that appeal, but what I'm really scared about Apple jumping into before they're ready is what Windows did, which was switch everyone from a pretty standard, pretty reliable Windows 7 desktop app into a completely redesigned UI that's meant to be suitable to touchscreens, be suitable to smartphones, be suitable to tablets, and also work on all your desktops that don't have touchscreens on them, which definitely makes makes me wonder what this necessarily means for the Apple software developers out there who are designing a lot of apps that are optimized for a touch interface, like on the iPad and the iPhone. Will those really transfer and optimize that well onto a Mac, given that, as of now, MacBooks and iMacs have no touchscreen support? Unless you're counting that touch bar, but stop. It kind of makes me wonder if it's really just going to be like it is when there's an app you're designing for the iPhone and the iPad. Yes, it's on the iOS store, but you basically have to redesign the entire thing for the iPad. Like, the iPad has its own dedicated section of apps, and it's safe to say that apps that run on your phone are very, very differently programmed from the ones on your iPad. Even if they look the same, in terms of developing purposes, they have to be redesigned quite a lot. And I think if you are extending the number of devices your app worked on to both the watch and the Mac, again, it would just mean like designing things a bit more complicated. You'd be stretching out that definition of there's really only one operating system across all of these devices. But is there though? Like, honestly, they feel like very different operating systems right now. The fact that to access multitasking on my iPad, I swipe up and then I also activate Control Center at the same time. And then on my iPhone 10, I swipe down to access Control Center and swipe down to access notifications and then swipe up into the side to access multitasking. Like, very different UIs, even though they look the same. I get it, and they run the same apps. I get it, but what will unified truly mean? Or will these barriers between the different operating systems really still be there? You just don't notice them as easily, but they're still there. My worry is that, as we've seen with a lot of iOS software updates, a lot of the time they'll have a bug that's on the iPhone 10 or maybe the iPhone 8, so they want to issue a software update that all iPhones have to get, even if you're not part of that problem. So a lot more recent versions of iOS fix a lot of iPhone 10 issues, and yet they still have to be updated on the iPad. That version of iOS has to cover all iOS devices. I could see this being kind of annoying if the same operating system was running on your Mac, watch, phone, and tablet. If there was one problem with, say, the Mac, and then you have to update the operating system across all of them, I could see it get quite annoying. And I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of on the side of, no, there's not the same operating system across all of these platforms, but that's okay. All of these platforms are so unique and so different that they should be specific in what they need to do. And it's okay that they don't run the same operating system as long as those operating systems work together very, very well. But either way, I don't think Apple's going to make that kind of harsh decision making. I think they're going to wait until they can figure out how to unify all of their products better, and they're not going to make a jump before they're ready, because Apple likes to perfect things. And honestly, we've seen things like Launchpad on the Mac for a long, long time. And ever since Launchpad came out, I was like, oh, they're getting ready for MacBooks and iMacs to have touch interface. And then it's been years since they've introduced that. They've never added the touchscreen support. So this probably means nothing, but I thought it brought up an interesting discussion because we haven't talked about it on here for a while. Should Apple unify all of their operating systems? What does that help with, and what does that not help with? All of those questions I'd love to hear your opinions about in the comments below. This is your Apple Ship here, and I will see you in the next one.